This is our fourth of 5 lectures that are associated with our navigation program. You'll note we're interpreting navigation somewhat broadly. I'd just like to alert you to the last of our lectures in the series by Alyssa Goodman on May 14th at 6 p.m. She's a professor of astronomy and is going to be talking about the emergence of longitude in the modern celestial navigation era. So I was actually delighted when I heard about this ensemble coming here. One of the things that I did in doing research for my book was to find out how tables of latitude and longitude were constructed in the Middle Ages. And this was largely through the process of dead reckoning, where travelers from one city to another would show up, and then the first thing that people would ask is, how long did it take you to get here? And over time, geographers could build up some idea of the latitudes and longitudes of various cities in the known world. When I heard about this, I then imagined what would happen next as travelers crossing the Indian Ocean or the Sahara Desert might carry their instruments with them, and it would be natural that people would get together and play music. Seems to me anyway. And so you would have multiple traditions where people would get together. And at least to me, I view music as kind of a universal. You may not be able to tap into the language, but when you start to realize that there's rhythm and pitch and intonation, you can start to learn what the other person's doing, even if they're using a different scale. So this was fascinating to me. So that is the navigation of sorts, where you're actually trying to take different cultural traditions and this universality and weave them together and see how they can be knit together. So what does it mean to learn a score from other musicians or just simply improvise within the context of mixed cultural traditions, which is absolutely fascinating. I've heard this many times over my life. I've actually dabbled in it myself when I brought my banjo to Jamaica and tried to play with reggae musicians and this sort of thing. I'm a physicist, so I'm not saying I'm an expert in that, but I'm just saying that marvelous things emerge when you travel with an instrument to a new land and you start to play. To guide us on this journey, we have a friend of the ensemble, Steve Seidel. He is a senior lecturer in arts and education in the Faculty of Arts and Director of Arts in the education program at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and has numerous things behind his name, which I'm not going to go into in great detail, but he's been a great supporter of the arts and in various ways here at Harvard, and it's kind of immeasurable in a sense. He is joined by 4 members of the Silk Road Ensemble who will participate in this musical conversation. Cristina Pato, who plays the bagpipe, Sandeep Das, who plays the tabla. I love the tabla. Not that I don't like the bagpipe, but I'm just fascinated. What you like? Okay, well, it's like if you play the same thing over and over again, you like the other person's instrument, right? I don't know. But anyway. Joseph Gramley, who is percussion, and Hadi Eldebek, who plays the oud or aoud percussion. And the ensemble emerged from the Silk Road project founded by Yo-Yo Ma as a nonprofit organization in 1998. And it was a way of bringing together innovative performers and composers from different traditions around the world. So without any more yakking by me, let me have Professor Seidel come up and take the chair.
John, thank you very much, and Paul, thank you very much, and everyone associated with the Radcliffe Institute who's making this series making today happen. Thank you for all of that. This is quite wonderful for us because the idea of being a part of a science series and a symposium on navigation was not a kind of immediately obvious thing to us. But when we began to think about it, it made actually great sense. So I'm just going to start. I'm going to say a few words about this notion of cultural navigation in the context of this symposium that's called Lost and Found. You're not, by the way, going to find your scarf here tonight, or your keys, or any of the other things that you might associate with a lost and found. We're thinking of it in a quite radically different way. Just before I begin, how many people have been to other sessions in this symposium, in this series? Fabulous. That's maybe just under half of you. Great that many of you are back, and wonderful that many of you are here for the first time. I think it's worth just taking a moment before we dive in to think about the notion of navigation. John got us started in that, and then the notion of cultural navigation. So just one way that I've been thinking about it as I've been anticipating this panel today is to think of navigation as something we're all doing all of the time. In the very broad sense, we're always trying to find our way. We are very much, I love the resonance of lost and found. I certainly feel lost most of the time. And I don't feel found that often, but I do feel like I'm trying to find my way and navigating my way. And when I began to think about it, I live a fairly circumscribed life, so I walk to work, I walk home. I'm not geographically lost most of the time, but culturally I find life ever more complex, ever more challenging, ever more wonderful for the kinds of navigating that I'm asked to do. When I think of cultural navigation, I want to be really clear. Sometimes when I'm in a very unusual situation, that is to say, unusual for me, not for the people for whom that's daily reality, I sometimes find myself just wanting to navigate the culture. That is, find the things I need, get there, get home, feel safe. That's one kind of cultural navigation, but that's not really what we're talking about here tonight. We're talking about a kind of navigation in which you're trying to find your way deeper and deeper into the environment that you're in, into the worlds that you're entering. And the kind of navigation that in which you are committed to in a sense, transformation, to going someplace you haven't been before. So as someone who works in the realm of education, to me, this is the movement from ignorance to a new kind of emerging knowledge, to understanding things that one did not understand before, and in understanding those things to be able to move and truly be present in a wider and wider and more complex world. So that's a little bit of the kind of framing that we wanted to put on the notion of cultural navigation here this afternoon. Let me just give you a little bit about how we're going to do the session, our plan for the session. We're going to begin by giving you a little bit of background. Many of you got a chance to see some of the video. I'm sort of curious how many have actually seen the Silk Road Ensemble in performance. Lovely, lovely. Welcome back. Although there won't be a live performance here tonight, but a different kind. We're gonna watch two videos. We're gonna give you a little bit of context. We're gonna watch two videos, and I'll say a bit more about those, but I need to go back a half a step. So I've known the ensemble for, I think, 7 or so years now, and have been in conversation with them. It's important for me to say that every encounter that I have with the ensemble is very much an encounter into a culture that is not really that familiar to me, because these folks speak a language that I don't speak, which is the language of music. I can understand a lot when I listen to music, but there's actually a huge amount I don't understand that's being communicated, expressed, and I certainly don't understand its grammar, and I really can't speak it. But I have always watched the ensemble from the perspective of an educator who's fascinated by the way human beings teach and learn from each other. And in that context, I can be enormously happy watching a rehearsal that to most of the members of the ensemble is excruciatingly painful, long, pressured, stressful, whatever. But I watch them teaching each other, learning from each other, inspiring each other, propelling each other forward in their capacities and what they can do and create and understand. So I watch all of their work, and I encourage you today also, because I think it's key to the notion of navigation, to watch and listen to them as people who are constantly curious and constantly trying to learn, and when they get tired of doing that, look to each other to inspire them to keep going. Sound okay? Okay. So we'll watch a couple of short videos. We'll open up some larger questions. We'll open it up to Q&A, and we'll try to end right on time. So let me introduce first Hadi Eldebek, Cristina Pato, Sandeep Das, and Joe Gramley. I'm going to ask Joe to give us a little context of the ensemble, and then we'll start to bring you in a little bit more a little more closely into the first video that we're going to watch.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. I know what you're thinking. Which exotic, far-off land is this one from? I'm from Coburg, Oregon. But indeed, these very gracious and fulfilling introductions have really done my job for me in telling you what the ensemble is about. We began in the year 2000, just down the road at Tanglewood, brought together by Yo-Yo Ma at a workshop in August of that year, where there were 60 artists, musicians, composers, conductors, working together in a workshop setting and learning from each other about their musics and their cultures, the places that we had all traveled to, the transformations that we had all experienced up until that time, which were to become, over the next 15 years, just incredibly immense in their scope and what we've learned from each other as musicians of the ensemble, which is only but one arm of Silk Road, which is based here at Harvard. We are artists in residence here at Harvard, and very proud of that. And we so benefit and are so thrilled to be able to come back to Harvard 2 to 3 times a year. And we're beginning a week here now. The ensemble has a lot of different instruments in it. You're going to see many of those instruments on the screen in just a second. All of the musicians that you see in front of you are members of the ensemble, and we work in various capacities with various other entities of our own lives, and also in the ensemble. The group, as I mentioned, has been together for about 15 years. We continue to tour throughout the United States and all over the world. We are lucky enough to work with Steve and Tina Blythe here in the summer times at the Arts and Passion-Driven Learning Institute, held here every August. We are starting a global musician workshop for younger players this summer in Indiana at DePauw University. So there is a lot happening. One of the windows into what's happening with Silk Road you'll see here today in the form of some rehearsals and some conversation amongst Steve and us 4 members of the ensemble. Thank you for having us here today.
Great. Okay. So as Joe said, one of the activities that our colleague Tina Blythe and Laurie Taylor, Tim Claffey, and I have been working on for the last 4 years is a summer institute called the Arts and Passion-Driven Learning. And each year, the Summer Institute starts with a concert. We open the very first event with conversation with Yo-Yo Ma, and then that leads right into a concert. So we start the Institute with a bang. And the video that we're going to show you is from that. I'm going to ask Hadi to just give us a little bit of introduction to what we're about to see.
Sure. Thank you for coming, and I'm very happy to be here as well. So the piece that you're going to see now is called Shirak, and it's one of 2 pieces that I brought in with the Silk Road Ensemble as part of the Summer Institute's Arts and Passion-Driven Learning, and it was performed in August at the Farkas Hall. The piece is a folkloric Lebanese-Armenian piece, and it was arranged specifically for the setting that we had at the time, and we're going to discuss that later on. So that's pretty much what I'm going to tell you.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so just hold that frame there, and that's a lovely, for those of you who have not seen the ensemble, a lovely short introduction. Wanted to introduce, make sure that you all knew, both identified the musicians, but also knew just a little bit about them, what they play, where they come from, so that you can begin, as you hear them introduced, to get a little bit of a sense of the cultural complexity of what's happening in that moment. So, Cristina, we'll start with you on the left.
Yeah, so that woman on your left, that's Cristina Pato. She plays bagpipes as that is her professional career, although she has a doctorate in classical piano. But what actually makes her living is the Galician bagpipe. I'm from Galicia, in the northwest corner of Spain, and that is the national instrument of Galicia. Next to Cristina Pato, you can see Colin Jacobson, who is a violin player from New York, who is also a cultural entrepreneur. He runs an orchestra called The Knights. Next to him is Nick Courts, who plays viola. He's from exotic Minnesota, and he is also a wonderful educator teaching at Stony Brook. And who is next to him?
A man with a big violin. That's how I first thought of him when I saw him many, many years back. That, wow, that's a big violin. That's how different a culture I come from. So, yeah, so no introduction needed. The man with the big violin. That's me standing next to him. I play the instrument called tabla. I'm from India, but now I live in Newton. So, very exotic, very beautiful. And the person next to me is the handsome Joe Gramley. And I'm always jealous of him because I play one instrument and he can play 20 at the same time. So that's Joe Gramley. And the lady, the pretty woman next to him is?
That's Wuman. She's from Huangzhou in China. She went to the Beijing Central Conservatory, but then immigrated to the States. I think in the early 90s, maybe? Yeah, here to Boston. She now lives in La Jolla, and has really brought the pipa, which is her instrument, the instrument that she plays, the pipa, into prominence as a solo instrument, which it began in China, but here in the States and in the Western world, but also as a collaborative instrument. She's pretty much the first lady of the pipa, and has done amazing things for that instrument and collaborated with you name them. And that handsome young man next to Wuman is
Oh, this guy. Yes, that's me. And next to me is, to my left, is Kojiro
Say
Umezaki.
something about your instrument.
Oh, sure, of course. I play the oud, or pronounced in Arabic, oud. It's a very old instrument, and it's very popular in the Arab world, but it's also played in other cultures like Turkish, Armenian, Greek, Iranian, etc. I think that's pretty much a good amount of time. I could give you more information about it. The man standing next to me plays shakuhachi. It's the Japanese flute. His name is Ko, and he's Japanese-American. He teaches at a university in California, and he's also an electronic musician as well. Next to him is Johnny Grandelsman. He lives in Brooklyn, and he plays violin. And he's been playing with the Silk Road Ensemble for a long time.
Great. So you're beginning to get a little bit of a sense of who is in the ensemble. Let me just be really clear. The ensemble is actually a much larger collection of musicians. This is just the group that was on stage that one night. At any time, it could be other instruments, other folks as well. So that was one piece, Hadi's piece, performed. Hadi, that was the first time, that was the world premiere of that piece.
Yes, there were actually two world premieres in that concert, and this piece is an arrangement for a folkloric Lebanese-Armenian piece, as I mentioned before. And throughout the discussion, I would like to talk about that process because I brought that instrument, which comes from a specific tradition, to instruments that don't usually exist in that setting, in that context. And that was a very interesting challenge, and I would like to share with you how I went through it.
So let me just check something. That was performed in the evening, and how much time did you have to rehearse that piece?
hour.
Yeah, like 45 minutes.
An hour?
Yeah.
Okay. No pressure on that hour. In the video that we're going to show you, we're going to show you about 7.5 minutes of that hour. And we'll say a little bit more about that before you see it, but the one point that I want to make now is about the idea of rehearsal as an incredibly, think of the rehearsal, whether it's music, dance, theater, whatever the art form, think of the rehearsal as a research lab, but think of it also as a classroom, and think of it as a kind of cultural melting pot, if you will. Don't love that image, but let's use it for the moment. What would be a better, a kind of, pardon? A cultural sharing and a place for teaching and learning. So, think of part of what we want you to really be noticing as you listen to the other comments and then watch the video is what's the nature of the, if you will, the navigation across through cultures that's going on in that 7.5 minutes. Okay, so Joe, you had the job of programming the whole concert for the opening of the Summer Institute. Can you tell us a little bit about what went on in your thinking? How do you think about that? And in particular, how you got to this particular piece of Hadi's?
Sure. So it was a path that required disparate types of navigation. And the way that I found myself taking the first few steps was through trust of my colleagues and through communication. As you saw on the shot of the instrument groupings, I don't think we've ever seen those instruments all together on the same stage before. I hadn't until that evening's concert. This was the first time, and has since been the only time, where those 12 sets of instruments had played a concert together. So if you take that into account, you would go to the next step along that pathway, which would mean that there's not music written specifically for those 12 different instruments. So I reached out to my friends in the ensemble, and I trusted them to help me start to walk down that path. And the first stop was Hadi. I wanted to honor his culture and his tradition by including his instrument on this program in an equal and respectful way as we had with the string quartet that you saw on stage and standard percussion instruments that you saw on stage, but also the gaita from Galicia and the tabla from India. So it was a long process. We took pieces that we had experienced together that we, in conversation, realized would work for this combination. Back to Hadi, he sent me 10 tunes that he liked, that he knew, that he thought might resonate with us as artists and with our group and sort of our worldview. And I listened to all 10 of those tunes. One of them was an hour-long concert from a very...
بالأفراح سن Lebanese album by Ziad Rahbani.
Yeah. And my mind was blown wide open. And it wasn't the tune that he wanted me to choose, that he had highlighted on the hour-long show. He said, go to this minute and this second. So I did. It was amazing. Then I went back to the beginning. I listened to the whole show. And at one point, I heard this tune. And it was the one. We needed a work on the program that everybody could play. This was the only what we call all play on the program. And we needed a piece that could work for an incredibly wide range of what we call dynamics in music. Dynamics means the louds and the softs, the level of sound. With amplification, this is still something that has to be considered because you have instruments that are of the most utmost and pristine quiet nature, and you have raw, visceral power on the other end of the spectrum. And this was the tune that I asked Hadi if this could work. I trusted him. We talked a lot about it. What was the appropriate venue for it? How would it work with these instruments? Could the scales, could the modes, could the intonation work with all of the instruments that you saw on stage? And we collaborated on it, and we came to that conclusion that it might work, and we hope it did.
Yeah. So Hadi, just say a little bit about then the process of arranging this, putting this together prior to the rehearsal that we'll see.
Yes, so once we confirmed which pieces among the 10 that were going into the program, we had to decide, because one of the pieces that were picked wasn't for the whole ensemble. This one was for the whole ensemble. And I haven't written music for many instruments in that setting, like the gaita or like the shakuhachi. So one thing I did is I communicated with Cristina. I sent her an email and I told her about the piece and that I would like to include her instrument in it. And I asked her for some advice about how is the instrument played in its cultural form traditionally. What is the range? What is the vibe that gives? And she gave me feedback. So we had a few emails going back and forth that shaped my understanding for that instrument. And it empowered me with a new approach to place that instrument in this whole mix. I tried to write everything in that I had in mind, but my main focus, knowing that the ensemble has different school of thoughts within. We have like the Arabic traditional system, and so the Indian traditional system. We have a lot of emphasis on ornamentation and on improvisation. The Western classical trained usually has a lot of emphasis on specification, dynamics, harmony, etc., etc. So I had to work with that, and for the sake of demonstration, I will just take the percussion as an example. Both of you are playing the percussion in this piece, and Joe is classically trained. Now, the traditional Western classical school of thought needs specific things, directions and stuff. Now, Joe, of course, at that point, he has been with the Silk Road for a long time, so it was much easier to work with that. Now, Sandeep, coming from the Indian culture, similar to my culture in that sense, we improvise, we ornament. If you just give us an idea, the vibe, a structure, a form, then we're good. But he wants freedom. So one end, one specification, one freedom. So instead of giving what will be played, I gave when it will be played. So at certain structures, said, okay, beginning, we want something building up and a specific Arabic rhythm, because I wanted to give it, I wanted the piece to keep its identity, Arabic and Armenian. And I came to the rehearsal and I gave those directions, and it was very much understood very quickly. And of course, I was relying on their mastery, like in what they do, because I didn't write every single note. I wasn't going to do this. It's not fun to tell everyone what they're going to play. Just this is the idea, this is the structure, this is the flow, this is the road, and then everyone contributes, and you will see later on the dynamics of the rehearsal itself.
Great, great. I feel like the phrase, you wanted the piece to maintain its identity, even as you were, in a sense, putting it in clothes that were completely unfamiliar to it, is very much at the heart of the delicate and but important work that the ensemble does. Lest we think, I have a background in theater. To me, rehearsal is the most natural thing in the world, but I've learned from Sandeep that it's not, or not always the most natural thing in the world. So share a little bit about rehearsal.
The perspective of rehearsals don't exist in Indian music. You're actually good or bad based on how little rehearsals you need. So if you're good, you're expected to turn up for a concert, say half an hour before the concert. You chat about everything, have a coffee, but don't talk about what you're going to play with one another. And if you ask, actually, you are not that good. So rewind back 15 years, I was invited for the first time to play with the ensemble for 4 world premiere pieces with the New York Phil. And I walk into the rehearsal with Kurt Masur, the conductor, and a lady comes and gives me a piece of paper. First of all, I don't know why they have this, stand blocking my view. Then she comes and gives me some pieces of paper, and I look innocently at her and I say, "What is that?" So there was pin drop silence, and to that she said, "That's your music." So I think, it was a moment that I always relive, but I relive it with a lot of happiness, because for me, the navigation that I do now, or even in Indian music, is almost, I think of it as sketching or drawing or making a painting every time I am faced with a new piece. The moment I hear people play, if you think of it as an empty canvas, you hear something and you immediately make an outline first. So I make that outline and then I hear it again. So then I put in the eyes and maybe sketch the nose and the lips. And then what I'm doing is coloring it with my hands. So though there is structure, but how I color it is the freedom that Hadi was talking about. That if you tell me the colors and say, oh, you can only use that, then you are, in a way, chaining me down. So from no rehearsals, I have come to respect rehearsals because I have seen the way, classically trained. I say I'm also classically trained because that's the kind of music Cristina and I learned. It's called Indian classical, and for us, everything else is Western classical. So I have come to respect that because I've seen music starting to, sound different over rehearsals. But initially, I took permission from Yo-Yo because we had long conversations, and I would stay out of rehearsals. I would play it once, and then go sit in the auditorium and let them practice it. Because for me, if I repeated the same piece over and over again, that was boring navigation. It's like, why would you play something and it was no longer new? But I respect it now because I see how by rehearsal, the Western classical musicians make it sound so refined and so different. But try putting 3 tabla players, 3 bagpipers, and 3 sitar players together and ask them play note by note, it's never going to happen. So it's a different kind of navigation.
Yeah. So not everybody walks into the rehearsal room coming with the same perspective. Cristina, what is it like for you? What?
I am very lucky because I was growing up in both traditions, in classical music and traditional music. So I relate to Sandeep because the way we learned in the bagpipe school, it was that way, learning by listening and by copying what you are listening. And in that process, you are already interpreting what you are hearing, and it's a different kind of process. But I was also raised as a classical pianist, so I had to learn the hard way of rehearsing many, many hours. There are 2 expectations that are very different when you enter a room full of classical musicians and a room full of, in my case, bagpipers. And when you are a classical musician and you are hired for a rehearsal or a concert, you are expected to be ready in the first time and then just polish a couple of things when you're working in the process. When you are a bagpiper working with other traditional music people, it's not that much about the process, it's more about the end goal. Like in the case of bagpipers, it's usually like bringing people together for a dance. So if you actually rehearse a lot, then you lose that kind of beautiful energy that you bring to a party. And to me, to be able to navigate from both worlds, it has been the challenge of my life even today. And as Sandeep was making a live example, I just have to say the bagpipe school in Ourense, where I come from, and Ourense is a city of 100,000 people. 10,000 of them are involved in the bagpipe school, okay? The bagpipe school and the conservatory for classically trained musicians were 2 buildings next to each other, literally next to each other. Only 5 people were going from one building to the other, and that includes my sister and my cousin. And speaking of cultural navigation, for me, playing bagpipes and playing piano meant to navigate from a rural family to a high-end class kind of family. And in these kind of performances or rehearsals, you can kind of see the kind of social process that every one of us from different cultures come from, and how do we actually relate to each other in that way. And I think in the case of Sandeep and my own case, just the way we relate to authority is very different from a US person, for example.
Okay, ready to watch some rehearsal? Okay, so let me just say before it starts, this is all shot with one camera from the back of the house. You're not going to be able to hear them speaking, but we've put captions on it, so you'll be able to follow pretty well. We're making no claims for the quality of the video, but all the claims you could possibly want to make for the quality of what's going on in the moment. So
One more thing I missed before. We missed one member.
Yes.
Kevork Murad, he's a visual artist, and he's with us, and you will see on the screen that he's been also rehearsing some drawing as well.
Canceled the dynamics in the 6950 after the guitar solo, so we're playing the old partition. Here in the previous 37, we all standing to play partissimo. I think it feels like that. Should we do that variation in fortissimo pianissimo, in your opinion, or? Yeah. Okay. Let's do it. Sorry.
Should we? We're keeping the.
Yeah. We're not changing anything.
Could we just go through real quick, talk us through from 69, so 69 is forte, right?
Yeah, 69 after the gaita solo, it's all forte.
Okay.
All forte.
And then 7-3 fortissimo?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, then for my benefit, 37 is the trading, right? Loud, soft, loud, soft?
Yes. 2 bars.
2-2.
Yeah, 2 bars.
And then what happens in 41?
That 41 is, yeah.
Stays loud.
Yeah, forte or fortissimo.
Got it.
This side plays for 2 bars, and then that side plays for 2 bars, and then we all put together. You know what I mean? So it's a little more like, the level will be different, but it might be more.
41. Yeah, 37.
At 37.
So
I don't know which side to start, but.
I think that might.
And then maybe at 41, you know, switch back, and at 43 the other goes more short, so there would be like a growing, you know what I mean? So it's left, right, left, and then the last part left and right together.
So 37 left, 38 left, 39 39 right, 40 right, right?
Yeah.
41 left, 42 left, and then 43 all together?
Yeah, so just try it.
Let's try that. Yeah.
Sorry, once?
Sorry.
37,
Just start
38
starting
left.
2 bars here, 2 bars there.
Where's that first?
Yeah, we start
Okay,
first.
Johnny, that was an amazing idea. Oh my God, brilliant. Sandeep has an idea that he'd like me to explain. Check it out, 85. So at 4 before 85, boom, ba-dee, boom, boom, ba-dee, boom, boom, ba-dee, boom, 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 ba-dum, boom, boom, ba-dum, bum. Here comes 85. Ba-ba-da, ba-ba-da. Here. So just a quick stop. Ba-ba-da, ba-da-da. Back into the beat.
Actually, after Johnny's idea, this sounds even better because we have that division and then stops together.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
77, Huth percussion solo.
Yeah. Let's thank you for making one.
81. Take it away, Chief.
3, 4.
Oh, that's right.
Let's do 77, that's easier. 77? This is the whole chorus for you.
No, hold on.
Cool. Great. So that we don't run out of time, we should run the piece.
Can I have an addendum to that?
2 addendums.
So, there.
Oh! Okay. Addendum number 2.
We're good.
Maybe then, in your solos.
That rehearsal took place 9 months ago. And I'm wondering, watching it now, what's surprising to you, what stands out to you, and what maybe in the context of this conversation about cultural navigation, what does that lens highlight for you in what you just watched?
I would like to highlight one of my favorite moments of this video, which is the moment in which Sandeep is explaining something to Joe, and then Joe actually speaks for Sandeep instead of Sandeep speaking. And that to me, every time I watch this video, is a very unique thing, and I wonder if Sandeep would like to address why, instead of speaking, will actually make Joe translate your thinking.
First of all, my English is horrible. So, first of all, my English is horrible. So I don't want to speak up. Actually, the jokes apart, from where I come from, and I think Cristina too, when you are in an ensemble, it took me almost 6 months or a year of Yo-Yo's prodding for me to be able to even express any opinion about any navigation. Because coming from where we come, we have this hierarchy where the senior musician says something and you just follow. So that was also something that we learned over a period of time. And the other thing is, in these situations, now I don't feel that way. I've been with them for almost 15, 16 years. But since I still don't read notations, it's sometimes difficult for me to say, like, okay, from 85 to 95 or 60 to 65. So it's in a way, I see a lot of trust and honesty and collaboration when I see this rehearsal, that, I have trust that if I share something with Joe, he will be able to, share it with the fellow musicians in a nicer way. And it's not necessary for me to say or express my opinion in my own words all the time. So I see that a lot.
Sandeep, I never occurred to me, but you don't have a score there.
Yes.
So you don't know what measure to suggest. Is that part of why you're asking Joe to?
It's part of that, like the first time Yo-Yo asked me to compose for the ensemble, like, Joe asks Hadi to bring something. I was traveling in Malaysia when he called me and he says, will you write something for the ensemble? So how do you write for an ensemble that you don't write in the same language? We have a notation system. So I told Yo-Yo on the phone that I can share my ideas. So he said, what would you do traditionally? And as Hadi mentioned, I would share an idea, I would share a motif, I would share a rhythm cycle, but then all of us together give shape to it. So I brought my first piece. And in this situation, yes, since I still don't know what is 85 or what is 65, but if you play 85, somehow I'm able to turn pages in my head, and I will know where it is. But if I have to specify 65, I wouldn't. So that's where the trust and the faith and the understanding that we have developed over the years kicks in, that if I say something to Cristina or Hadi or to Joe, they will understand me as I understand them, and we will be able to collaborate and navigate this piece together and make sense of that.
Great. What else stood out for you in watching it?
Me? Well, as Sandeep was speaking, I was thinking about another form of navigation. Even more tricky than this. Have you ever tried to navigate the hierarchy of a symphony orchestra rehearsal? Lots and lots of it's rife with polemics and politics. And I think part of that, what you saw there with Sandeep and I talking to each other during rehearsal, is sort of section group mentality of, like, we were the percussionists there that day, and we were talking consistently throughout the rehearsal about what we wanted to do together. If we just jammed out the whole time, it wouldn't sound very good. It would just sound like very muddy and not articulate and way too much playing. So throughout that process, there's sort of sub-navigation happening, and it was a sort of percussion section navigation that was happening. And so we had some ideas, and I think you saw me writing stuff down. It's sort of, that's my training, right? I was trained to play in an orchestra. And I've seen this video a couple times, and this was the first time I actually saw myself writing stuff down. And it makes a lot of sense to me, and it's what I'm always doing. And he's not writing anything down. So, yet he remembers it better than I do. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is that in this situation, there were different pathways moving off to the side at the same time, and that was one of them, this sort of me and Sandeep talking to each other. That's one of the things that I noticed when I saw it again for this time.
Great.
One of the things that strikes me every time I see this video is how involved every person is in the piece. And I felt this with every piece. Say, I brought this piece in, but once it was inside this lab, it's not my piece anymore. It felt like we were all shaping it. And that means a lot, because you want the other musicians to feel that this is their music. And because it will just produce a drastically different effect. It will connect more. Now, my role comes in the guidance and navigator, if one would say, because I could give ideas, I could give just a structure, and let's say we picked a certain scale or a certain rhythm structure and cycle. So this I could provide to keep us within that identity. But that's pretty much it. After that, there's so much to give, and all those ideas that were shared show you how much involvement everyone felt in that piece, and that's what you want. So I think that made it sound much, much better.
Yeah. Cristina?
I don't know if you realize the dynamic challenges that we have in the ensemble, as Joe was mentioning at the beginning, and the fact that there are instruments that you could hear during the performance, but they were not audible during the rehearsal, like the shakuhachi, the Japanese flute. And then there is the other side of the balance, which is my bagpipe, which is the only thing you can hear when you are playing it. Even when you are the performer, and this is actually a serious problem for us, you can only hear yourself. So in a rehearsal process, as a pianist, I am very much involved with the piece, as Hadi was in this rehearsal process. But in a rehearsal process as a bagpiper, even if I want to be respectful with my colleagues, as Joe was saying, with their process in the percussion section, if I play, they cannot hear each other. If I rehearse with them, they are not able to rehearse. And that, to me, every time I watch this video, is a lesson, just because the way I work and the way each one of us work in their own independent lives is very different from the way we work in the ensemble. In my independent life, when I rehearse with my band, I take the lead and I tell them what to do. In this rehearsal process, I actually stay back, just because in the moment I start playing, there's no way they can actually hear each other. So for me, it's a way of actually hearing what is happening. And then, if I am lucky enough, during soundcheck, when we are amplified, I can actually rehearse in a way that I can try some of the ideas that they were mentioning, like when they say mezzo or fortissimo. Well, when I hear fortissimo, I know that is probably my chance to play something, so I just go and do it there, and I am ready for the performance to say, okay, he said fortissimo in 68, so I'm looking forward to 68, because those are the 4 measures I can play. And you can, I can see that in this rehearsal, because I'm sitting in the corner all rehearsals through. I'm active. And it's the same thing with Ko Umezaki, the Japanese player, who has the same problem but in the opposite side of the balance. No matter what he does in rehearsal, it's not audible for anybody. So that, to me, it was a very good exercise, just to watch those two ends of the balance.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Any other comments just right now on watching the video? Because if not, I just want to take a step forward. So let's do that. The question now is, so for different lengths of time, some of you many, many years, you've been in this space, which struck me watching it today as a space of exceptional care and sensitivity and respect, as you've said, even in the presentation of suggestions. Almost nobody even finishes a sentence. It's like, let me just float this out and we'll see whether it's useful to the group. I'm wondering whether these years of rehearsal and performance and all the other settings in which you've been engaged in this cultural navigation, whether there are lessons that you take into the rest of your lives that serve you. Because, of course, at every moment we're navigating cultures.
You all will have to believe this. This is an example that I'm giving you, has nothing to do with music, but you promise that you'll believe me? I have taken this experience of the ensemble working together while navigating traffic in New Delhi. And I'm very serious that, I am at a situation where people are honking, there's a truck coming right at me and from the wrong direction, and there have actually been moments and when I'm about to lose every sense of being a so-called civilized human being, and I have channeled the ensemble and say, okay, what would the ensemble do in this situation? And it has always helped me cool down, take it easy, and I have been able to navigate through the worst traffic in New Delhi. I'm absolutely truthful. I don't know if it makes any sense, but it has helped.
One thing that I feel I've taken many things and learned so much throughout the process. But one of the things is the importance of the people you're working with, and the importance of being respectful, and to get them to adopt the piece or the project itself and feel involved. And I think that applies on any other projects I've done, whether it was entrepreneurial or educational, etc. This is teamwork, and you bring out an idea, and you've seen this. And Johnny suggested one idea that made Sandeep suggest another idea, that made Colin complement that idea. You know, it's just, you just need to start from one place and wait for the magic to happen. And that's how ideas brew in a way. So this is very important. It's just an evidence of something I learned, that people, the team is very important. And to foster that relationship, you need to be culturally sensitive. You need to be tolerant, open-minded. You need to show respect through learning about the other person's culture, as well as teaching the others about your culture. That is a form of respect, in my opinion. Yeah.
I think I learned patience, and as a solo artist, you usually have two options: or being the leader of your band, or being the guest of somebody else's project. Silk Road is somewhere in between. You always have an opportunity to be the leader of the piece, as Hadi was in this situation, but you also have to nurture and create the space, the safe zone for all of us to actually say something in a different context. What is good in that is everything that Hadi and Sandeep was saying. For me, as a leader, the challenge is a question of patience, because in my own context, it will take me 5 minutes to get to the result. In this context, it will take 1 hour to get to the ideal result. And there is so many beautiful questions that can be asked. What is better, if just tell them what to do or just let it happen? But for me, it actually has helped me in many different situations to, when I am hired as a guest, to try to be a team member instead of being told what to do. And that's something I keep learning from the ensemble.
Joe, do you have a thought here?
I go back to the patience that Cristina mentioned. I've experienced a lot of the same. I was gonna try to tell a story that happened this year. I also teach at a university, and I was speaking with 2 of my grad students. They were new students. And they were telling me how at their undergrad, a week before classes started, their professor would give them, another percussion program, would give them the schedule for the year. They knew exactly what pieces they were going to play, what they had to prepare, when it was due, when the concerts were, what the programs were, from September 1st through May the 1st. And these 2 new students had already sort of pushed my buttons a little bit in terms of that. And I think that I was channeling a lot of my experiences with Silk Road in the flexibility and the patience that was required to navigate brand new pieces. And I'll tell you what, an hour is actually a long time in this 21st century arts economy to have 12 people in Boston on stage rehearsing. That's like a luxury, an hour for us, actually. So what did I do? I did a little experiment where I teach, and I gave them a piece of music. And I said, okay, here's your part. It was an arrangement of just a melody called Pulau Dewata by Claude Vivier. And I said, okay, here's the first rehearsal. I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be away. They said, okay. I said, I'm also not going to be at the second rehearsal. And now you could see these 2 grad students starting to freak out a little bit because they wanted to know exactly what they were going to play for the whole year. So I show up for the 3rd rehearsal, and they had done their work. And I come in and I play my part. And they're flustered the whole time, and they can't figure out why I'm doing this. And I said, I'm doing this to show you about what other aspects of a life in music might be required, and the patience and the flexibility when you work with artists, such as what I'm doing to you right now on purpose by not showing up for the first 2 rehearsals. I'm not equating that to Silk Road, but I'm equating that to short time frames, new music, flexibility of genre, of idiom. And this is one really important thing that I've learned in this process of trying to navigate new music such as this.
Great. Okay. I think this is a great moment to open it up. I promised that we would have time for some dialogue, and we certainly welcome questions, but we also welcome your observations. We welcome your thoughts, your own experiences. So I'd like to open it up. Why don't we start with you? And it would be lovely if you just tell us your name at least. And thank you, Cristina. Yeah.
Thank you. So I was struck that Yo-Yo Ma did not contribute to the conversation and during this rehearsal, and I wanted to know if that is usual and purposeful or not.
You know, I think I want to answer this because, as I said, I come from such a different tradition that when I was introducing him, I didn't introduce because he doesn't need introduction, but I think he has taught each one of us here so much by not saying or actually doing or telling us what to do. It's incredible. He's that one glue that has put us together. I'll give you an example that's been a lesson of my life. So it's not only about navigating rehearsals, it's navigating tour, it's navigating travel, it's navigating sound check. And believe me, you know, sound checks can be very nerve-wracking. I still remember this one incident in Germany. Now we have our own sound engineer travel with us. This is prior to that, when we would go to different venues and we would have different sound engineers. Huge auditorium, the sound check was not going right for anyone. And everyone had something to say, including me. And then suddenly I realized that the one man who hadn't spoken a word was sitting right next to me. And I looked at him and I was like, the first question that entered my head was like, okay, how many of these 5,000 seats have sold because of you, Mr. Sandeep Das? And the answer to myself was, of course, probably none. And here you had the person who had sold out this auditorium who hadn't uttered a word. But by doing that, he taught me a lesson of my life. It's difficult to make him sit down and be serious because he's always joking like he loves to have fun. But then I grabbed him and I spoke with him. And he says, Sandeep, tell me honestly, you are a performing artist. How soon do you know when you get up on stage that this is how the sound is going to be tonight? And I said, within the first 5 minutes. So he says, because you know within the first 5 minutes that no matter if you break your head or kill the sound engineer, this is how the sound is going to be. The sooner you let it go, you can enjoy yourself and focus on the task ahead. And ever since, my life as an Indian musician, as a Silk Road Ensemble musician, or as a leader of an organization has become so peaceful. I get up on stage, I try my sound, and within the first 5 minutes, I know what it is going to be tonight. I take a step back and I enjoy life. And I see others struggling and I enjoy it even more. So he has taught us a lot. He has taught us a lot by not saying it. But he also does things to us, you know, when he will speak to you completely in a different context and spur, you know, like he has that technique of switching on something that you don't even realize. And then it just brings out a different Sandeep or a different Cristina. So he sees that from his experience, like he needs to talk to her about something. And so it's amazing. It's amazing. I can write a book on that, so I'll stop myself, what he has done and what he has taught without even uttering a word. So, yeah.
But if he has something to say, he will say it. I mean, in this rehearsal process, it was more about sharing what we had to say. And I mean, you could hear some voices, but not all the voices. It's just when you have an idea, he creates that safe zone for us to share the idea. That doesn't mean he doesn't have an idea. That means at that specific rehearsal, he didn't have anything to share, but he will share it when he has it, really strongly, as we do.
Can I add one more thing? Sorry. So when Sandeep was talking, it's related to the whole theme of what we're talking now about navigation of culture, cultural navigation. And there's one important thing that I thought about. To me, is it's not only that I'm navigating the culture of where that person came from, like Indian culture, but the culture of that specific person, specific individual. And that's what happened like when you talk to Yo-Yo Ma, or you talk to Sandeep, or I talk to Michael Black and the other musicians. I feel like I would like to learn more about their journey, because everyone has different culture, more or less, their own specific personal individual culture. And that's also what we navigate. So it's not only on the broad term. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yes.
Hi, my name is Allison. Thank you so much for coming. I was hoping, as we've talked about this evening, that you could talk about how you feel like music can help navigate through difficult times, whether you're the player or you're the listener or it's the collective audience and group or the individual. If you could just talk about how music can help you heal. Thank you.
I'm just gonna make a quick jumping because the piece is online and you can go and check it out, and it was premiered in the next building in the Gasset House. But one of the beautiful things we do as artists in residence at Harvard University is foster creativity within us too, and trying to connect departments through different things. And I am, as many others in this room, I'm sure, I have my mother has frontotemporal dementia, and my way of coping with it was actually learning a lot about the subject with the help of some of the neuroscience professors at Harvard Medical School, and also to write a storytelling piece that will tell the story of my mother. And I would never have done that if it wasn't because I have an ensemble that would let me try that kind of experiment in which I was telling the story of my mother through music and a storyteller. And the piece is on the Silk Road YouTube channel, and you can check it out.
Yes.
Yeah, hello, my name's Kevin. A question regarding freedom and your sense of self and how it's developed through your experience with the ensemble in the context of cultural navigation. Talked about freedom, but unfreedom as well, I suspect was something that was going on while you were practicing and having to hold yourselves back. And I was interested to know whether that journey through the unfreedom has changed your sense of what your idea of freedom is. So.
You know, as a traditional Indian musician, you are basically trained to be a soloist. So even if there are 3 musicians or 4, we take turns in taking solos. So initially when I started, you know, I would only be interested in a piece where I had big chunks of playing. But then I would see Joe or Shane or the other percussion members of the ensemble, like how even if they were just playing one ting in the entire piece, how seriously they were taking it. And since I would stay out of rehearsals to let them rehearse, slowly it started making sense. It's not about taking solos or playing big chunks, but how that one hit on the triangle is adding beauty to the piece. So I think the journey has been is about reaching a point where I value what I learned traditionally, but I also really respect what these guys do, that though they don't have the freedom to play whatever they want, how they want it, but how they make it beautiful and actually make it free for themselves with a lot of feeling. So even though they are playing that one note that the composer wants exactly at 89, if you play it at 89 and a half, you're out, right? But with the passion they have, they make it very free for themselves. So I, as an outsider, see both, and I feel very enriched in this 15 years that I can enjoy both worlds, you know, and have a great time.
Real quick, on Friday night at Sanders Theater at 8 o'clock, you will hear the Silk Road Ensemble perform a piece that Cristina brought to us. It's called the Latina Suite. And there's a ton of notes in this piece. It's a jam session. It's really beautifully arranged by a bass player named Edward Perez. The bass player is going berserk on the instrument, sounds amazing. Everybody's playing a ton of notes, and there is one triangle note in the whole piece. And that is my favorite note in the entire piece. And I'll tell you why, because Cristina does an introduction. There's 16 bars, and then on beat 2, I do Sandeep's ding. And then the piece progresses from there, and it is that sense of unfreedom that gives me the freedom to move forward with that piece. It's just like, I don't know, it's really hard to explain. It's a really, really deep question, and that's one way that I think of the freedom versus the unfreedom is through that one single note.
Another piece I'll quickly mention is by the composer from Singapore,
Angel Lamb.
Angel Lamb. It's a beautiful piece, but at the end, the percussion plays just the triangle again. And believe me, every time the ensemble plays that piece, I'm already waiting for the end. Because that moment for me is so written down, but every time Shane or Joe or Mark, whoever is playing that piece that night, for me, that's the release, that's the freedom. So it's a beautiful question. Yeah.
So we are coming close to the end of our time. And I think I suggested to the folks here that we try to save a moment for any last thoughts. And I just want to give you a moment to think about that. As we wrap up this kind of amazing exploration of this notion of cultural navigation that, I don't know about you all, but that phrase had never been in my mind until Isabel and Laurie brought it to us, courtesy of Radcliffe Institute that was so warm in inviting us in here. So any final thoughts from you all? Joe?
Sure, I'll start. Maybe we'll go this way.
Sure.
It's, for me, we were doing it, I just didn't know that we were doing that, the cultural navigation. We were in service to finding that arrival point of the music or of the meeting or of the conversation or of the planning of a tour or of a production meeting so that we could get to that moment of sublime musical beauty or a beautiful lighting scheme or the perfect sound mix through cultural navigation.
I think I would repeat what Steve is saying, that till I wasn't asked to be on this panel, I never seriously thought that we were doing what we are talking about today. So I must thank Radcliffe and Harvard and Isabel and Laurie for sometimes taking us away from our instruments and forcing us to think about what the hell do we do, you know? And in that way, all panels that I have been with you, Steve, since the start has taught me so much. So I feel just grateful that you guys help us open windows to our own selves.
I think as an independent musician who travels 9 months per year to work with other bands everywhere, you never get to be a tourist because you are always working with other people. So you are constantly navigating the way of working, like as a woman working in the Arab world, as a woman working in the Latin world, as a woman working in the US jazz scene. You are constantly adjusting and making your point through music. I think the nature of this ensemble is very different because I don't feel I have to adjust. I just feel I have to be myself. And Jojo and the ensemble creates that safe zone to actually let you be yourself. And sometimes you like yourself better than other times. But that for me is the beauty of this way of navigating instead of trying to be the nicer person in the room. In this case, it's just trying to understand where is that comment coming from and how can I address it without offending the other person because it's a person I have to have breakfast with tomorrow or I have to be on tour for the next 2 weeks. So that's one thought. And the other thought that I don't remember your name, gentleman? Kevin. There is something very beautiful about having limitations. And in the same way Joe was talking about a classical musician, The way I love my instrument, the bagpipe, as opposed to the piano, is because it has all the limitations in the world. I am loud, I don't have enough notes, and either way it connects with people just because we push for it to connect. So to me, I really enjoy that limitation part of being a musician.
To me, I feel like just like a ship navigates and uses stars and landmarks to go to a certain place, I feel with the ensemble and what happens in it, the culture and navigation and all of this, I am on this journey. And who doesn't want to be on a journey with people he likes and people who are very interesting? So I feel that I am on the ship of the Silk Road, and that we're all navigating to get to a place where we're all happy. No particular geographical place, but we are trying to discover different countries and different cultures, and that's a hell of a trip. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, maybe that's a hell of a trip is a perfect way to conclude.